Okay, I think we're gonna get started. If y'all want to take, if you haven't, if you came in later and haven't grabbed one of the little cards, there's these little audience participation with some giveaways I'll talk about in a minute. There's the extra cards are up in the front here. If you want to grab one, pass them around. So this is Print Meet Digital, Digital Meet Print, a matchmaking. I'm Greg Albers. For the last 17 days, I've been the digital publications manager at the Getty. Before that, I was the founder and publisher at Whole Art Books, an independent art press, doing a lot of ebooks, and also the creator of the People's eBook, which is an online ebook creation tool. Some housekeeping about those cards. So I've passed out these cards. Again, they're up front if you need one. But I'm asking you to share an example of something digital you'd like to see in print or something in print you'd like to see digital. You can make it anonymous if you want, but if you do it and we collect it at the end, there are some prizes. There are these wonderful BFF necklaces. There are 3 of these beauties. So you can keep one and then give one to your print counterpart at your institutions. There's also, for a runner-up prize, there is the Smucker's Goober, which is peanut butter and jelly in one jar. Nothing goes together like peanut butter and jelly. So those are little prizes you can win if you fill out those cards. The cards, we may use them here at the session to sort of spark some discussion after the individual presentations. But I also was interested in using them to kind of continue this discussion and sort of brainstorm some ideas that we can share on this blog, which is, we call affectionately the Blicky, which is a blog and wiki. Shout out for the Blicky. It's called Beyond the Printed Page, and it's really a growing resource of digital publishing information for museums. We invite you all to be members. You can sign up on the site. You can also be contributors. We're always looking for anyone who's doing interesting projects in museums or sees an interesting project that they want to share. We would love to have you there. So the address for that is digitalpublishingblicky.com. It's a mouthful, but you won't forget it once you do it. Also here, we use the hashtag DigPublishing, which maybe we haven't used as much as we would like to recently, but we will be back at it soon. And then e-production is another one that's not museum specific, but which is a really lively and active hashtag for independent ebook producers and digital publishers. It's a great place to go to find talent if you're looking to hire. It's also a good place to go for answers if you're working on something on your own and you have a quick technical problem. The group there is really helpful. So that's that. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a brief introduction and then turn it over to our panelists here. The theme for today is print and digital and where those things, how they meet, where they come together. Going back in time, this is, of course, lead type. This was how books and other materials were printed for a long time. Each letter is individually cast in lead. It's backwards, and then it would be hand set in a row to make a whole book page. All the spacing between the lines, make sure it's all even, and then you ink up the letters, put on the paper, print your one page, and keep doing that until you have all your printing. For me, this has a sort of a modern day equivalent in code. I think that there's sort of a fundamental connection between the actions, the act of doing these two things, whether it's setting lead type or setting code, where you have this readable thing that you can look at that creates then a product. It starts as sort of this really obscure, technical, detail-oriented thing, but then becomes this beautiful book. So it's a way of processing content. And I think the act of setting lead type and the act of code are really connected. So print and digital. Quick history of how these things have interacted. First, of course, there was print. In the beginning, there was print. The first codex books were in evidence in the 1st and 2nd century, I believe. Scrolls were, of course, used before that. But so for millennia, we've had print books. Then in 2007, Jeff Bezos introduced the Kindle, and Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And now, all of a sudden, we have digital. There were, of course, digital products before that. There were ebooks before that. But I think it was really 2007 and the introduction of those two devices and the ones that followed those devices that really made ebooks and digital publishing a viable option for both readers and publishers. Then over the next 5 years following those tools, print tried very hard to be digital, and digital tried very hard not to look smug about it. There was a lot of hand-wringing. There still continues to be a lot of hand-wringing. But I think we're now finally to a place where print and digital are starting to be a little bit more collaborative and egalitarian in their relationship. I think we're starting to see things that are digital wanting to go to print and vice versa. And I think that in both cases, workflows and functions and the way we do things in both worlds are starting to cross over, and they're learning from one another. We see that in artist projects like this one, Library of the Printed Web. This is just a collection of things that were on the web that were digital and have somehow been found their way into print. That top one is actually a printout of an animated GIF, frame by frame. So things like that. Then most recently, too, we have Kenneth Goldsmith's Printing Out the Internet project, where he asked people to print out the internet and send it to him, and they piled it up in this gallery. So I think that the artists are seeing this first, but now we're starting to see it institutionally as well, and that's what we're here to talk about today. All the love. Our panelists today are Robert Weisberg, the Senior Project Manager in the Editorial Department at the Met, immediately to my left. Rob and I think, first crossed paths over Twitter. Probably were one of the early people talking about digital publishing in the arts. And Rob is, of course, a contributor to the Blicky as well. And although this is the first time we've met in real life, or in our life, in person. Next to Robert is Stephen Waldron, the art director and creative director for Harvard Art Museums. I first found Stephen because I found a project he had worked on that he's going to talk about a little bit, I think, for Harvard, where they did a PDF version of a catalog that extended the content of the catalog, that was able to do put more things out into the world than were able to go into that print volume. So I saw that project first, and I sought out Stephen and found out he's done quite a few projects that cross and consider the line between print and digital. So I'm happy to have him here. And then last but not least is Pamela Horn, who's got the best title, I think, in all of digital publishing in museums, which is the head of cross-platform publishing at the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum, which I love because it says exactly, it indicates what she's going to be doing and what that institution is looking for. It's not a question of, and it indicates our theme today too, it's not a question of print or digital. She is both those things. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rob. Thanks so much. You can stand up. Don't be shy.
No, it's not true. It's a little room.
Thank you.
Greg and I are bringing the gray flannel suit back to museum publishing. We agreed to do that beforehand. So I'm going to provide a print publishing perspective on the matter of print and digital working together. I've tried to figure out at length sort of what to say, and this is version 23 of the talk, and Greg said to me, version 23 is insane. And I said, that's not insane, that's print publishing. Though now I think about it, or as they'd say in digital, it's iterative, so we'll pretend that it's iterative. So this is what many people think of as a print technologist. My first title actually at the Met was computer specialist, which at the time meant typesetting and crawling around on floors installing Ethernet cables, since the museum at that point didn't support Macs and hoped Macs would go away. Though print did develop a certain view of the publishing landscape, print is way down on the bottom. All the other stuff that we've ever come up with to help print is in the middle. All of the stuff that kind of scares print people is there. And then in the way distance is the dystopian future where we've all been loaded into software. And many of these things led to a bad reputation for print. And it's all about print is slow. Slow to react to the changing industry, slow to get our books out the door. All about adapting, embracing, updating. And that's led to this idea that print is just always behind the curve when it comes to printing. But I do want to put out there three sort of caveats about this reputation. And since we all work in museums, we all know what the curators are like. I swear this is an actual quote when a curator was asked why we needed to proofread after 17 months another round of corrections. And she said, what we need to correct are the incorrectnesses. And I think I made a noise during the meeting because I knew that I was going to use that. Part of our dual mission as museum publishers is not only serving the audiences, but serving the curatorial vision as well. And because of that, from a publishing point of view, we do much heavier corrections much later than any regular publisher would allow. And depending on the press run, you can almost become a vanity publisher. But reality number two is, and since I'm a print person, there'll be reading here. This was actually came out of an interview from the Frankfurt Book Fair, which actually has a very heavy digital component. The Center for Science and Imagination at Arizona State University was trying to do some experiments of quick, agile, iterative publishing. And I'll just go to the second or third line. Print books are a very mature tech. They don't require a lot of power. They're very durable. They're very easy to access, and we all understand how they work. And what he's talking about is UX, is user experience, which if you told a print person that they had a very stable UX, they'd have no idea what you were talking about. But the reality is that there's something that works about print that we shouldn't be in a rush to lose. We should be in a rush to have it work alongside digital. And that brings up another point. In the many years I've been at the Met, one thing I've learned is that print is digital. Other than the heavy book, art book landing on your coffee table after you've bought it, and the piles of hard copy marked up with red pencils, everything about the process of making print now is digital, from the original preparation of the manuscript to the editing, production, and the archiving. It was not a conscious decision in general for print to not have cross-functionality with digital. To me, it was more about unplanned content growth among museums, where you went from, we don't need your files yet, to now we have apps and we don't need your files anyway because we already have the apps and they're not compatible with the InDesign or Quark files that you made. And I just want to explore that a little bit during my talk. Just a little bit of a background of print publishing at the Met. The Met's first printed materials came out shortly after the museum's founding in the 1870s. The modern editorial department that I work for began in 1964. I began a little later than that. We have a staff of about 25 full-time editors, production, photo researchers, and about twice that many freelancers. It's probably more, but somebody might tell the museum that we actually employ that many freelancers. We've done consistently in about 25 titles a year through all of the ups and downs of financial world and the publishing world. That includes exhibition catalogs, collection catalogs, our quarterly bulletin, and our scholarly journal. It doesn't include children's or trade books. And despite the general contraction of print's share of the content market, our sales have stayed pretty solid in the niche art book market. And the next point I cannot emphasize strongly enough is that the curators love their printed books. They just love them. And the Met, to its credit, continues to also love the printed books and continues to support a role for print in the museum's mission of educating as wide a range of an audience and as wide a range of art as possible, while also keeping to the curatorial vision which we help develop during their books. Through all of this, print has established certain values to a museum. Thorough, or some might call insane, levels of editorial development. Experience with scholarship and apparatus, which is all of the footnotes and the literature and reference sections that appear in really tiny type and the bibliographies, which also appear in really tiny type, and the indexes, which appear in even tinier type when you have to go to print the next day. Exhaustive color correction of images, albeit in CMYK, which is still of use to the institution, and long-time relationships with rights holders, among other institutions. And the fact is that after the book is over, I get increasing numbers of requests for our files from other departments at the museum, in addition to the curators, exhibition design, merchandising, external affairs, and visitor services, among others, all want the files that print has put together. I didn't want to sound defiant or anything like that. So just to do a little bit of comparison of print and digital side by side, there definitely are exceptions to this. We can all come up with instances of fast print and slow digital. But in general, in my experience at the Met, print has generally been slower, required more deliberate stages. Digital may do as many stages, but in a more agile way. The format of print is well established. The format of digital is still, in many cases, to be decided. New technologies are part and parcel of a digital publishing department, not as much so in print. And I was a little unsure what to call it, but in terms of, I call it scholarly time. A book takes a particular snapshot, a particular slice of a moment of scholarship upon its printing. Digital is more dynamic and can even involve feedback from the audience, which print hasn't figured out yet. The first significant project at the Met where print met digital was Met Publications, which came out last fall. And I don't want to go into it too much since it's been out for about 15 months, but Tom Campbell, the director of the museum, wanted editorial and digital media to work together to find a way to provide access to the Met's significant backlist of printed books that were now out of print. And the result was Met Publications, though it does many things besides. The reader that allows people access to text searchable pages was outsourced to Google Books. That's sort of one way of preserving the look of the book. Obviously, this won't work as well on a phone. But in the background, the digital media department did exhaustive linking and tagging of really all of the material in all of the books. And that was a manual process, which is about as close to a print experience as I can imagine. And this provided an exhaustive connection between the Met's backlist of books and the extensive digital resources that were already online at the Met. A few numbers of Met's publication in the first 11 and a half months that it was out. We were always very happy with the number of visits, happy with the number of book views on Google, almost 900,000, and almost 15 million total page views. And we're up to about 900 print publications as part of Met Publications. We thought a lot of people would download the PDFs that are generally available unless there are significant rights issues. But in fact, the PDFs have not been downloaded at particularly big numbers. People are generally using Google Books or Met Publications to get the material they need from the text searchable pages, and then using it as a portal into the Met's digital offerings. There is a small print-on-demand program, which the curators continue to be absolutely thrilled about. So don't dismiss the need of a curator to feel that their book is still a living thing. So just to revisit my earlier chart, when Met Publications came along, that was a place where digital media might have acted more like editorial, and editorial might have acted more like digital media. Getting the book scanned and converted and approving the various stages that we needed to see from our vendor had to happen at digital speed, had to happen very quickly. Digital media had to spend months and months and months doing all of the tagging and linking, much more of an editorial type of schedule. Editorial was actually very open to whatever format digital media would come up with. Digital media had very fixed ideas about what would work from their point of view. Editorial was open to new workflows. Digital media needed to work within the museum's existing architecture. So that actually meant sort of a technology tussle on that side. And many of the more recent books, for instance, may still get reprinted. So in fact, there's an opportunity for editorial to update the books while the books on digital media are not being updated dynamically, or if we do a reprint, we're not necessarily putting the reprint onto Met Publications. The next big project relates to the guide to the Met. The original print version of a new guide to the museum with about 600 objects from the collection came out in late 2012. It was ported to Met Publications around the same time. 6 translated print editions came out at the end of 2012 and also went to Met Publications, with 4 more planned for this spring. And in 2014, there will be an expansive online feature based on the print edition run by the digital media department, while the editorial department is actually doing its first significant digital publishing on its own, a device-based version that'll happen in 2014. So instead of actually working together to bring out the same set of files, editorial and digital media together are kind of building a universe of content around the Guide to the Met, which then made me start to think about maybe it's a false dichotomy between print or digital. Maybe we're both part of a larger whole of content. And then that led me to this crazy-ass thing, the content mandala of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. These are content flows, real and imagined, built around a content stream when the curator first has that eureka idea over an exhibition that might travel to the Met, or making a loan show, or putting some part of the collection out there for the public to consider. And basically, we don't need to read it word for word, but you have various layers of internal content flow, external content flow, or work we do with our vendors, and then beyond that, this new layer of the audience participating in a museum's content. And of all of these things, editorial and digital media don't actually control that much of it. We're all together participating in a larger content universe. A little less crazy was, I then tried, well, let's make a grid of physical and virtual content, content flows that are internal, content flows that flow out to audiences. And even here, editorial and digital media are only a small part of the overall world of a museum's content. I think it's interesting that there's sort of less content flow inside the museum than flowing outside. So coming out of that, I thought, well, there's clearly things that print can learn from a digital department. All of the things that digital takes for granted, I think, are things that print that can help out print. There was even a panel earlier today on surveys and testing. That's a concept that's really alien to print. Print just sees how the book sells. These kind of analytics are things that I think digital can help print with, as well as improving workflow, improving content management. Most people in print, if you told them about a CMS, would have no idea what you were talking about, as well as getting feedback from audiences and connecting audiences and authors, as well as finding the new, whatever the new art book publishing format is going to be. I would like to think that digital can also learn some things from print, I think at museums and the web, the term slow cooking was used to describe print workflows. I prefer to think of it as artisanal content, which if no one liked artisanal, we'd all be drinking Budweiser or in Canada, Labatt's, I've been told. Print has experience with parallel workflows, heavy research techniques into scholarly apparatus, as well as its own design ability to work with a very mature technology. So instead of the mandala or the grid, I've seen a lot of Venn diagrams at this conference. To me, digital media and editorial are together on the lower right as publishers. Internal content is on the left as a CMS. You have a reminder. And visitor experience, which if you listen to museum directors is what they're mostly concerned about, is on top. That area in the middle, I think, is where all of them need to meet. Though I think if you asked a director, it would be more like this. We all exist inside the universe of visitor experience. So moving forward, print and digital, I think, a museum needs to see print and digital together as a single publishing entity. We need to see print readers as users of content the same way someone might be a user of digital content. Digital is very good at analyzing different contexts. I think that's something that print should have done. And I think if you remember the mandala, going back into that original content stream that the curator has created, and going back to that point and coordinating as many print and digital endeavors as possible. Because it's mostly, in my opinion, institutional willingness to mix them is about willpower and not just technology. And I know that many museums have done some work on integrating print into museum content, discussing best practices. I think if you think back to the grid, there's a lot of room to improve internal content flows within the institution between print and digital. Hackathons are another rage, and I think the next hackathon at a museum should include ways of creating print content as well as digital content. And finally, encourage cross-pollination of print and digital workflows because print publishers are standing by whether we know it or not. And thank you, MCN, and this is my information. And I hope to be blogging again at the Blicky before too long. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Rob. There's a lot of good points you raised there, and I think hopefully we get a chance at the end to go back and discuss them, contradict them, agree with them, just discuss them in more depth. So what have we got? Mine is in here somewhere.
For those of you who came in a little later, we have some little cards here at the front to fill out for free giveaways. We're asking you to share something that is in print that you'd like to see digital, or digital that you'd like to see in print. We'll have a drawing at the end of the thing.
So, as Greg mentioned earlier in my introduction, I'm from the Harvard Art Museums. So hi. And for those of you, you may wonder what is and who is the Harvard Art Museums. Not everyone knows exactly who we are and what we are. When you hear the word Harvard, a lot of people think preppy, get the sweaters around the neck. They think great leaders and great minds who have gone to Harvard. We've got a pretty cool Barack hanging out there in the library. We think of Harvard as being the butt of many a joke as well. This is one of the only safe ones I could show today. A lot of pretty explicit ones. So we are part of that Harvard. And we're also a teaching museum, which makes us very different than a lot of other museums, I think. I know a lot of museums still have a teaching element to them, but we exist solely to teach. We're a teaching and learning resource for the Harvard community, for staff, for faculty, and for students. We've over 250,000 objects in our collections, a good chunk of which is made up of coins, so it kind of skews that number a little bit. But nevertheless, 250,000 objects is a sizable collection that we have. Made up of 4 research centers and 3 museums. A lot of you are probably familiar with the Fogg Museum. That was our main building and our main site. Made up of 3 other museums too, the Sackler Museum and the Bush-Reisinger Museum. But we're closed right now. So we don't have an open museum. We're in the midst of a renovation and expansion project on the site of the Fogg Museum. We have Renzo Piano, who seems to have a monopoly in the whole museum architecture world right now. So we've got him on board. He's helping us blow up our museum, making it a fantastic facility, due to open the fall of 2014. So I want to see everyone there, please. Our last building, the last one of 3 museums, closed in June of 2013. That was the Sackler Museum. So during this closure, it's a great opportunity for us to rethink how we operate, how we deliver content, how we engage with our audiences. So it's a moment where we've had a lot of really great discussions, from what can our website do? What should it say? What about interpretive materials? Can we rethink those interpretive materials in the museum space as well? Can it be beyond print? Can it be digital? And what are the best methods of achieving that? Through to wall labels too. Let's rethink the wall labels. Maybe it's not the same printed on a substrate, Lexan, and slapped onto the wall. Maybe it's a bit more engaging and a bit more interactive than what one is used to. So like I said, some of these questions that arose, what do we want to do with our website? And what do we want it to do for us? How do we want people to experience and interact with or use our publications? How can we ensure we don't compromise on design over content and vice versa? I'm a real proponent for the content being the best it possibly can, but also the design of it. Coming from a design background, I naturally think that. But there's a lot to be said for the way content is delivered and how we build in the design into that process while the content is being created. It'll probably go back to that later on. Then the bottom one, which is a theme running through what I'm going to discuss today, what do we mean by publication anyway? Like, what does a publication mean nowadays? Is it just an art book? Is it more than an art book? I like to think of it as being anything we put out into the public domain, whether it's an ephemeral piece, marketing communications piece, a tome of an art book, a collection catalog, whatever that is, can we consider that to be a publication? Which then opens up a lot more questions that feed into the digital aspect, which I'll go back to again. Rob touched on his talk earlier about the size of your team, like how many people you have working on these projects. And I always love to know, like underneath or behind the curtain, how many guys do you have working on this? Do you have 15 people, 50 people, 150 people? If only. So we at the Harvard Art Museums are a pretty small team. We have editorial, who look exactly like that. We have design, 3 people who look like that. And increasingly, we're working with our diet department, which is our Department of something and emerging technology. Something like that. Yeah, that's good. All good. All good. So we're working with our digital team as well and trying to create these publications, roll them out in the most effective and efficient way possible, and in different ways. We're all for trying to do stuff differently, but more effectively. So is this a sign of the times, the fact that our digital departments are getting more involved in all the publications we do and not just bringing them in at the end of that project and saying, hey, how do we get this online? let's make a PDF. There's got to be more to it than that. So what type of projects have we worked on recently, or are we currently working on? So just a little insight into the kind of stuff we're working on at the Harvard Art Museums. Greg mentioned earlier the Jasper Johns catalog. So as part of that, there was a traditional print publication that we did. Had the entries for the exhibition, had essays by faculty as well and some students. But then as a last minute project, there was a request to create a digital version similar to the book along the same lines, but solely with essays written by students as part of their coursework. Again, which speaks to the resource that the Harvard Art Museums is within the bigger picture of Harvard. So we always want to publish a lot of this great scholarly and student work that students are actually creating at Harvard. So last minute, we created this digital, there should be an outline around that. The screen is really light. This digital publication, last minute thing, let's create a PDF version of it. Let's put it online. Let's make it accessible. Let students download it if and when they want to. It's searchable by the nature of a PDF. So this was our first foray into last minute digital publishing. PDFs are nothing new. They're good. PDFs are getting better, but there are a lot more effective ways of creating digital publications, whatever that means. So this is it. This is the One Happy Family. And again, from a design perspective, always building design into the process and ensuring there's integrity in all the design, making sure it's cohesive and looks part of one family. So this is a print publication, student essays, then the exhibition space itself. Another recent project was our In Harmony exhibition. It was a collection of Islamic objects, artwork donated to us by the Calderwood family. Really great exhibition. Again, we had a traditional print catalog, which is a really nice piece. But we also started dipping our toes deeper into that water and started experimenting with augmented reality. And not in relation to the print piece itself, but more in the gallery space, and making the print publication the source material, and then making the augmented reality and digitally deployed content in the gallery space an extension of that publication. So we're trying to blur that line between what the print publication is and what the digital publication is. In this case, it was the augmented reality. So how did the augmented reality work? So this was all web-based using an app called Layar, out-of-the-box app, more commonly used in commercial purposes, used in magazines to get fancy ads animated in a printed page. So we wanted to use it in a museum context in a way of delivering more didactic, interactive content. So one would come into the gallery space with a mobile device, either an iPad or a smartphone. They'd have the Layar app loaded up. They would simply point their device at the objects labeled within the exhibition. We had it clearly labeled. They'd get us overlay onto that object. And we wanted to make that transition, or that way of accessing this further, more richer content, as easy and as seamless as possible. So it was a simple one tap through. You get into the next page. Within each object, we had a mixture of audio, we had video, we had transcriptions, trying to get as much varied content as possible. And the beauty of it was that we could track how many people used this, right? Like, what objects were viewed most? When did they jump out of that object? How many people tried to use it, didn't use it? We have all that beautiful, rich data that we can use and help inform how we do this again in the future if we chose to go down this path in the future. So this is really our first, a test run, a prototype for what we may use or could use when the new museum opens in fall 2014. So jumping on to another recent project, this is our index magazine. We had a print version, a digital version of this publication. Each one complements the other. The print version comes out 3 times a year. The online publication, which we consider to be the main publication, our main index, is online only. That's updated daily through aggregated content, but mainly through museum-generated content by our small team of staff. So again, we're playing with that blurring of the line, where the website is the main publication, the print publication is secondary, but they still live together. They live in harmony, which was built into the design and the strategy when we created this. So there's real nice harmony between them. They work really well together. One of the main strategic reasons for bringing out this magazine was while we had no physical museum to speak of, while we're closed. Thank you. While we're ramping up for the new museum opening, we want people to know we had a presence still. We're still alive. We're trying to play with this eclectic feel, lots of content all over the place. And again, using technology in as best the way we can to make it interactive. So this is the layout. So we used layout for this one too. We wanted to have that seamless connection between the printed piece and the main publication online. And again, how can we make that as easy and as seamless as possible from a user experience point of view? So we're trying to strive for this one click. It takes you through to more in-depth content with richer multimedia on the website. So this is our really quick video we did in the lunchroom a couple days ago. So you're just hovering over the printed piece, and it automatically plugs in interactive content where you've zoned that area out. So that then requires a simple tap through, takes you to the bigger content in the online magazine, the main publication. Then we've designed the main publication in such a way that it's presenting you with related content. We want to have the people just navigate around and get lost in the main publication, which is the online one here. So if you'd clicked through this casting ideas, technologies, or reversal workshop story in the printed piece using layout, it would take you to this. There's then this cross-linking and cross-pollination of content on the online magazine to keep people in that space, but still have enough breadth and length to navigate through the magazine and browse all our really rich content. So since I mentioned we're closing, we have this great opportunity to rethink not only what our website looks like, but also what it does. We want it to be more than a place for visitors to find admission hours and directions to the museum. Through analytics and research, we found that the majority of our traffic on our website came internally from our staff going online, looking at the collections online, searching for objects, creating light boxes of those objects or object packages. Browsing Index too. Index has been this amazing hit with all the staff. They're now finding out what's going on in the conservation department they didn't realize before because it wasn't being published and we weren't documenting that. But Index now allows for that. But thinking about a new website and a new start in a broader term, we got talking about how can the website serve up a lot of materials and content that a lot of people automatically want to build into an app. And we have this aversion, or not an aversion, but the thing with apps and the whole create once, publish everywhere philosophy, we want to move away from apps where in siloing content, we want to deliver, we're saying what if we can deliver everything over the web? That content is one source content. I know you're going to touch on this a bit more, Pam, so I don't want to go into it too much. But if the website could serve up all that content and do away with apps, do away with third-party whole rabbit holes, and allow the website to do everything we want it to do. And that could come in the form of interpretive tours in the museum once we open. Can we have interpretive tours that people opt into following and browsing? The new building will have Wi-Fi set up throughout, so they can just access that. throughout the building, digitally deployed labels in general. What if all our wall labels were online? What if they could be accessed through the web if we have Wi-Fi connectivity in there? If people want richer material, more content, either type in the accession number. We can build this in using responsive design into the new website. As soon as they're in that space, we know they're in that space through geolocation. We can have a little field window that pops up prompting them to type in an accession number. They can then reach this far more data, far more information about the object, and then link could surf and browse this little network of further information relating to our collections. Question, as marketing materials and scholarly publications are moving online, can the website wear many hats and serve these publications beyond just a PDF? PDFs are still good. It was our first foray into digital publishing with the Jasper Johns publication, but it can do a lot more. And I don't want to go into the whole responsive design and adaptive content again, because I know you're going to talk about that, which is all good stuff. But this, as I finish this up, thinking about that definition of a publication again, and trying to break down this notion and this fixed idea of a publication being a print catalog. I think it's got to be a lot more than that, and really broaden that and find new ways of publishing that are seamless and easy and cost effective without a really big team of people like we have. So to end on, there's paper, there's pixels. Paper's still not dead yet. I'm a proponent of pixel and paper. I love them both. I wanted to finish on this little, if this works. The fact that we still need paper in our lives. Digital can do a lot of things, but it can't do everything. There's probably going to be an ad that pops up here.
Emma. Emma. Emma.
So paper has a great future. It's still with us.
That was great.
You share that link with everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on. Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, present review.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So we are kind of living, I guess, parallel lives. I'm at the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum, which is part of the Smithsonian, and we too are closed until fall 2014. I'm going to hope to tell you a story about print books and objects and labels, and API as much as it is about back-of-house systems, collection database, and foundational restructuring. We're all thinking about similar things these days. It's about shifting ground and building new bridges between departments, and about new pathways and ways to generate, edit, input, and export content. Cooper-Hewitt is currently poised somewhat like a perfect laboratory for the wishes that we're trying to achieve right now. As I traverse the ground of of all of these new horizons, I can identify that in addition to rolling up my sleeves and digging in deep, there's a lot of expectation management for trying to identify how much brand extension carries, and it's difficult to quantify accurately at the moment, as the Cooper-Hewitt Museum is currently closed and reimagining itself as well. What I keep asking myself since I've gotten to the Cooper-Hewitt Museum is, do my expectations about coming here over a year ago match what the museum thinks is realistic, and where do I see untapped markets for museums? I want to demonstrate how Cooper-Hewitt's renovation and redesign provides the opportunity at this pivotal time in publishing to bring at its foundation and rebuild a fortified new publishing machine that incorporates all text and content-based output needs, and even develop new cross-departmental relationships between education and development initiatives. And hopefully, coming from the corporate trade publishing background that I come from, look to see if there are new revenue streams in that for the museum. My move from trade publishing after 21 years in the industry to the museum as head of cross-platform publishing was my own personal tectonic shift. During my last 2 years at Sterling Publishing, which is owned by Barnes & Noble, the only venture into ebook acquisitions origination that they bought into was this idea I came up with to start an ebook license series that I developed with an online site called thefix.com. It was this edgy addiction recovery site. They had great writers and great content. We published the first title. The idea was to reach beyond the addiction recovery audience and go into pop culture. And we published this human interest story, which was an interview with Courtney Love. Who can refuse Courtney Love? It's a $2.99 retail. And the Fix was super buzzing with coverage and publicity. The problem was we were only selling our books on bn.com. We did not have Amazon sales, which proved to be disastrous in the end of the ebook series. So I've got reams of insider publishing experience to bring to bear to the Cooper-Hewitt. Worked for this brick and mortar retail chain. We're a publisher within our own retail arm and in close proximity with customers of all shapes and sizes. I was frustrated that the company that I was at was not interested in harnessing our content for any new digital output. Nor, on the print side of things, there wasn't much buy-in from the top for imagination in managing and reimagining our content. So I moved to this not-for-profit government institution of the Design Museum. I couldn't have been more excited to see Seb Chan's post for the position of head of cross-platform publishing. Cooper-Hewitt and the Digital and Emerging Media Department were looking for someone amazing to take the museum's publishing program into the 21st century. So publishing is within the Digital and Emerging Media Department, which is way cool to begin with. So I was bringing all this experience editorially. There are a lot of really traditional publishing paths for book development involving an author and an agent in acquisitions. Agents, stay away from them. I can say that because I'm a lawyer, but I was accustomed to coming up with, to working in an alternative process and coming up with ideas, putting teams together, finding content, building stories around it, finding paper engineers and illustrators and artists. Like, think about your audience and build the book. And as editorial director of my own imprint, I had developed licenses with museums, Museum of Natural History in New York and the George Eastman House. So let's say my gravitation to museums was kind of organic. So I was thrilled to come to a place where platform and market are built in. That's what I thought. That's my utopian concept. So I'll keep you posted as things progress. Let me step aside just really quickly for a moment to share a very condensed history of the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum to answer that question, WTF is Cooper-Hewitt? It's also relevant to the to the issue of platform, market, and brand in the world of museums and institutions as we're poised to rethink who we are. So along this timeline, 1897, Sarah and Eleanor Hewitt opened the Cooper Union Museum for the Arts of Decoration. It was so named after the Cooper Union, founded by their grandfather, Peter Cooper, where the collection was housed. 1903, Andrew Carnegie built himself a mansion in what is now New York City's Upper East Side. The mansion still stands, and for those of you familiar with major sites in New York, it's located a block north of the Guggenheim, was famously designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is a chunk of information you probably know. And our mansion will become relevant in a moment. By the late 1960s, the original Decorative Arts Museum was no longer financially viable, and the Smithsonian agreed to take over the collection. At the same time, the Smithsonian was in discussions with the Carnegie Corporation to assume the stewardship of the mansion. In 1976, Andrew Carnegie's mansion reopened to the public as the Cooper-Hewitt Design Museum, so they could once more enjoy the collection that the Hewitt sisters had acquired. In 1992, the Cooper-Hewitt assumed the mantle of National Design Museum and began to make design rather than decorative arts. That's the primary focus. So we're still charged with the long-term care and study of the Hewitt sisters collection, but we spend most of the time thinking about the capital D design as most people now know it. So if you were 110 years old, you'd need some maintenance too. And in 2001, the museum closed its doors to complete this historic renovation of the mansion. Reimagine what it means for the museum to embrace the internet in body and in spirit. To treat the network and all the opportunities and challenges it presents as part of the museum itself, rather than that rubber ducky floating alone in the bathtub. If it sounds a bit hand-wavy, it's because it is. And a big part of our job on the digital team is to make those ideas tangible intellectually, but also to build them. When I joined 13 months ago, so we were closed for front and back of house renovation and restructuring, and publishing, as I said, sits within digital emerging media. And when I left trade publishing, the conversation was a tired and suffocating, is it print or ebook? And what I'd come to discover is that isn't the question at all, thankfully. In fact, what an opportune time to move into the museum world, where lots of us are, grappling and morphing to not only keep visitorship up, but to double it, keep audiences engaged, and garner whole new sectors of devotees. And the questions I came to explore to use to mold the shape of our publishing program are, where do I see untapped markets for museums? Can a museum realistically be a successful niche publisher? Does it need to revamp its entire workflow to make that happen and be profitable? I'd say yes. Are publications always a loss leader? Not necessarily. And how do you assess market viability when curators pitch a book and catalog ideas? We're still working to find that out. So why continue to put resources into the book as object? Because illustrated books and books plus kit packages have a niche. What doesn't a trade house have that we have? And those are some of the titles that I had published at Sterling, which were real book as object packages, and were sold as such, and really found homes. And we'd like to say that we can continue to do that. So my plan was to publish where the content lives. We have a built-in marketing platform and a devoted audience. So enter the Cooper-Hewitt collection, our archival publications, Smithsonian, institution libraries housed in the museum. We have the largest library and rare book archive in the country on design. But how will this translate to exponentially increasing our physical and online audience and more than doubling our visitorship? We want to use our existing resources in new ways. So this is the beta release of our new collection database. Cross-platform, we're part of the department that just, has launched the API where 116,000 of 217,000 collection objects are online. We've built this new website with new search capabilities, more than 75 titles highlighting the museum's collections published between 1897 and 1987 are available online in PDF form. We are working on, in our redesign with Diller Scavideo and Renfrew and local projects and Pentagram to build an interactive gallery experience where we'll have digital tables where you can access our collection and experience a completely new Cooper-Hewitt, and I'll get into that a little more. What I also found when I got to Cooper-Hewitt were that all of the backlist print titles were not digitized. There is no file of archive publications. There were no print files. The titles relating to the museum's exhibitions and collections and resources are while they're consistently recognized for their curatorial perspective, there's nothing digital, and I can't reprint them unless I want to scan them and go to lots of cost. So we've published hundreds of books covering a remarkable range of historic contemporary design, but I don't have much access to them right now, which is a bummer. So, content. This is a whiteboard in our office. This is what we do all day. We talk about the raw, unearthed treasures, opportunities, collection as content. You can search our API by colors, concordances, countries, departments, exhibitions, people, periods, random roles and types, and now we're adding tags to the mix. So I mentioned that museum rebranding provides me the chance to move from Cooper-Hewitt from our decorative arts label style to a contemporary design museum label. This is a prototype of Pentagram's new label for us. I'm basically working with them to develop this, this format. We're using a tombstone that will work for us now, rather than ascribing to a sort of staid, ages-old art template. We're a design museum that in our representation falls somewhere closer to a science museum than an art museum. That's what we'd like to get out there. And certainly the gallery interactives we're planning call for all the exhibition didactives to help move this transformation along. Some of this stuff is kind of under wraps, so I can't really talk much about it. But the heads up is that there will be an icon, little pen, where you can capture some information and access the collection website and dive deep and across it. That's all I can say, or else they're gonna take me away. So we've started this tagging project. Micah, my colleague, is smiling because he knows he works in digital emerging media as well. Where we're workshopping 5,000 objects for the reopening. And it's my job to bring curatorial and education together in a room and devise a new language for coding the objects and the in-gallery experiences. How do you turn your worst enemy, TMS, into your best friend? TMS houses all our content, labels, videos, tags, collateral material. So fortify a collection database and how do you fortify this collection database where 0.05% of records are complete? So the curators are now completing the catalog records and they're entering in this Google Doc their label chat, sort of extended table chat, the tags, and this is in an effort to have some sort of version control. This will be a document that I edit and that we re-import back into TMS. Then we will be able to export it using our designer's label template code to populating our new label design, and the labels will be printed in-house for a more efficient and cost-effective process. And the new publishing practices that I've been sort of laying out requires all of these different departments to be working together. And I've devised this multi-platform workflow. This is a spreadsheet that delineates exhibition label schedule, label didactics, ebook and print book production, editorial schedules. And this is a map for streamlining our content to be transformed into various multiple buckets. I want to digress just a moment because we really haven't talked much about EPUB 3 all that much, but I feel like I need to say something. A little word about these enhanced illustrated ebooks. I just want to mention it, wave at it, because it will be an important bucket at some point, just not now. But right now, we simply don't know whether readers like or want or will pay for books that take full advantage of what digital publishing platforms can offer. And it's likely going to take a longer time to find out than we expected. This is principally because of the nature of the fragmented ebook environment. I mean, just look at the tablets and e-readers available for digesting them. So the challenges for creators and publishers that aim to create new kinds of experiences are really profound. Publishers and creators interested in these innovative ebooks are faced with a range of challenges and frustrations. We know people do enjoy consuming ebooks with many enrichments because film and television producers have produced enhanced ebooks to accompany shows and have had success. The catch is that these ebooks are made available for free because they're such valuable engagement environments for shows on which they're based, and they're funded from network or film companies' marketing budgets, which we don't have. So print and ebook publication, streamlining content generation for multiple buckets requires new editorial and production processes. And authors and designers, production editorial and coding. And this is a lot to bite off and chew without a known end result. And that's what I just want to say about that. We can talk about that afterwards. I just want to go to show you some of the other examples of how we have taken our content that exists and turned them into different types of products and different types of content buckets. So, example of using collection-based content in a variety of ways is our Object of the Day, which is a daily blog post sent to thousands of subscribers and available on our website. We're using content generated to populate our table chat, for which you saw the bucket on that spreadsheet, and for our in-gallery interactive experiences. And it also, in June, will become a published postcard book sold to the trade. Design File. This is a series of ebooks I launched last year. 3 are now out, distributed by DAP, on design, writing, and research, accessible through any ebook reader for $2.99. I've set up a consortium of institutions, School of Visual Arts and Parsons for now, but hoping to collaborate with other museums and institutions. And this is a way that digital publishing will help to garner new audiences, bring them to our website and to our museum. Making Design, which will be published in fall 2014, is our collection handbook. We're currently, and I just finished putting out some fires before this session, getting the curators to work on 900 short captions and 900 longer captions to streamline our cataloging process in the book, but also they're sort of fortifying our collection database at the same time by working on this content and then re-importing it into TMS. There's a book to be published in fall 2014 about said mansion, The Life of a Mansion, where the manuscript that we generated and image research is all providing content for in-gallery apps that local projects are creating in the mansion and about the Hewitt sisters. So it's all sort of bringing life in many different forms. And then we are going to have another exhibition at opening called Beautiful Users, which is about user-based design, and the exhibition publication, which I'm licensing to a trade publisher to sort of take the heavy lifting off of my shoulders, because you're looking at the publication department at Cooper-Hewitt. I couldn't even afford stick figures. So I'm looking to sort of reach out to other publishers to work in collaboration and license on certain books. And lastly, I'm working with Gallison and Mud Puppy on producing note cards, children's activity books, and wooden magnetic letters based on our patterns and wall coverings and drawings and prints and objects. And these, this is just to say that there are still, uses and desire for something to hold, play with, put on your refrigerator, write in, as well as read on your tablet reader. The reshaping and reformatting and realigning is a massive project, and this first year has definitely been chock full. So, the new ground that's been broken towards this reopening won't be the completion of the project, but really it's an opportunity for all of this beta to roll out, and then we can begin to see what the Cooper-Hewitt platform can do at that point. It'll really focus a lens on how our lab that is, scurrying around and playing with prototypes and coming up with all these new ideas, lives, and how print and digital can work together to form this new output and maximize efficiency, foster new markets, new ventures, and hopefully broaden audiences and visitorship. So, thanks. And thank you.
See if that's on. So we have some time for discussion and questions from the audience as well. What I'd like to do is maybe I make a sort of an observation myself, and then I'll pass it over to the panelists and to all of you. The thing that for me really came across as one of the common threads through all three of your presentations was this idea of the publisher not as a producer of a specific format, but perhaps as the authoritative source for information about the collection. In various ways, Rob, you talked about how after the print book was published, you were constantly being asked for the digital files to be reused in various ways. And Stephen, you were talking about the layout, using the book content to sort of give you content for the Layar app in the gallery, and it came up with Pamela too. So, is the future of publishing maybe not format, but authority or shaping of content in some way? I guess is what I'm getting at. I'll let you answer that. I'm going to collect all those cards quietly while they're answering, and then we'll keep the discussion going. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Well, I think for the sake of publishing, the future has to be more than just a specific format. It has to be about content, because I think there's enough, even beyond the museum field, there's enough sort of roiling in the publishing industry that if it's not focused on good content, publishing is just going to lose out to entertainment, even more than it might already be. So continue to focus on quality, because that's what museums are about, cultural quality. And sort of let the format wars kind of work themselves out, and just continue to focus on bringing content to audiences and fulfilling curatorial vision, and that's kind of format agnostic. I think that's the way to go.
So for me, I think it's really important and crucial to think of the format and the content at the same time. Like, know what those delivery mechanisms are going to be or could be. Obviously, you can't foresee too far into the future, but in changing that content through whether it's adaptive content or through responsive design to suit the delivery mechanism that one is viewing that content on. I think it shouldn't be one or the other. It shouldn't be content or format. It should be both being conceived of at the same time. Just results in a far better experience, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, Steve, I would agree with that. I would say that I had shown you that spreadsheet where we've got exhibition and labels and print and ebook, and it's really just all happening now, so, as we speak. But I'm finding that, I have to be very, very, very focused on making sure I'm thinking about the bigger picture, or else it's going to be really costly, because you're going to have to go back. The other thing is, and I know we have this, I'm not sure, I imagine everybody else does, but there are so many assets that are duplicated. They live in closets, on hard drives, on servers, in Dropbox, in Basecamp, in Photo Shelter, and there's so much duplication. So I think it's about really, really projecting and thinking about how to minimize that.
Yeah, Liz.
So I hear from all three of you stories about workflow, and that seems to be a big part of us transitioning, and I think it's probably something everyone's struggling with as well. I love seeing Google Docs and everything. And I'm just curious to hear now, in your case, Pam, of course, it's a department, you handle both, so it's pretty clear who owns that, who kind of manages that, but maybe it is or it isn't clear. I think in other cases too, I'd kind of like a discussion of who owns workflow. Does it come together collaboratively? But even if it's owned, or even if it's collaborative, someone needs to own it. And even in the case of your Google Docs, how does everyone agree about how it's coming together? And how do we get beyond this falling into just a rack of bureaucracy?
Well, Liz, you're 100% right. I mean, the ownership of the project is something, and it's almost like a hot potato because everyone has so much on their plate. I would say that, we're using this opportunity of me coming in and sort of saying, I'm new, let's do something new here, as, one of, giving me leverage to do that. I would say getting curators to work in Google Doc versus, in Word has been a little bit of an arm twisting. But I think that, part of what my job is it's really dotted lines to curatorial education, development, and marketing. And it's truly about building this new structure. So in Chicago, you have these established silos and things. So I sort of see digital and digital media and publications and your digital department as really saying, guys, we need to really think about restructuring. But I would say that as far as ownership goes, is you just need to set priorities for what projects are coming up at what point, what the priority is, and what everybody needs to focus on. So while a curator may say, well, I'm working on this show and you have to do otherwise, I think everybody has to feel that they're part of it. That's what I've come across.
We're still working all that stuff out, so we're a mess. we don't have that workflow system set up yet, but we're fortunate to be pretty small and pretty nimble. So when we do, I think we know what we need to do. We just need to take those steps to implement that. And there's a lot to be said for general housekeeping, like having all that data and all manuscripts and tombstones and chats and object records all nice and tidy, clean, ready to go, and using that content as many times as possible instead of trying to rework that content every time. So if we do that housekeeping initially, we can push that content out in so many ways at such an efficient and effective speed that we just become far smoother at what we do, and we can deliver content in a far smarter way instead of reinventing the wheel every time and trying to edit this and tweak this for this exhibition because the paintings across from this Gauguin, so we have to create a dialogue. And that's all good stuff, but we need to streamline and make sure all our source content can be used in a multitude of different ways. But we're still working it out. Good question.
I think, Liz, you and I have talked about this. Within editorial, I think there's sort of two of us in the staff who are kind of the carbon monoxide detectors of bad workflow problems. The assistant managing editor and myself, if we smell gas, it means like the workflow has gone off the rails on a book. Institution-wide at the Met, I think the Met's big enough that different departments have established very good project management systems that haven't necessarily been made available to the staff as a whole. So I've been to meetings of project manager. At the Met, a project manager is usually somebody who brings in a construction project for a new gallery or the new plaza on Fifth Avenue that we're working on. So it's not something that's migrated over to a publishing setting, and I think that's a problem. And I've worked a couple of times on trying to port systems over from IT, or I'm working now on the first projects using Basecamp, and it's one of those things where if I don't remind people to use Basecamp, they'll just keep emailing themselves things through Outlook. So it's very, very much a work in progress. And actually, I'm sort of hoping that working more with digital media we'll be able to gain some of those, that digital expertise in workflow. And I think I mentioned that we can sort of borrow that and kind of get away from this old school notion that publishing workflow sort of happens to other people and that we're an old school publisher and it's not necessary. So that's where we really need to be looking at other departments, I think, for that kind of expertise.
I think we have time for one question.
Yeah, getting back to content, most publishing departments in museums are profit centers. And as this digital content, even for digital-only publications are out there, has anybody noticed any reticence to share some of that content with other interpretive departments in the museum, either the web group or the people that create didactic information? So I've experienced that a little bit.
Yeah. Go on.
I have one sort of anecdote about it. So this probably happened long enough ago that it's not a huge deal. It happened the first time editorial did a book related to an exhibition, and digital media then took the files and sort of brought out what was really meant to be just a little experimental teaser for the book. There was absolutely no attempt to monetize it. I think, in fact, it was just being given away for free. It was going to be a free app for download. And so some iPads were made available outside the exhibition. And kids went up to it and played Angry Birds on it. But then people would look at the app, and then I think somebody would go up and, user testing, and would go and ask the person, "Oh, what did you think of that?" And he said, "Oh, I thought it was very nice." I said, "Did you think it was, told you things about the exhibition?" "Yes, it did." "Would it make you want to buy the book?" "Well, we thought it was the book." So I think the issues are, and that kind of thing makes print publishers really nervous about providing their files. And it makes them nervous just because it's not something that people should then have sat down and talked about. Well, what's the right role? What's the right? How does the digital product serve the book? And the next one will have a lot more buttons to buy the book. So it shouldn't make people nervous about it. It should make people want to have conversations about it.
I would just say that it's that moment that it's not print versus digital, and it is exactly what you said, that there needs to be something in the digital that points to the print book. And, curatorial has to trust that, you can't sit in a room and, protect your content, because, they're the generators of that scholarship and that content, and you need to have it out there so that you extend that brand, and people come to see the exhibition and then buy the book. I know it sounds a little simplistic, but it's what we have to kind of cross our fingers and hope for at this point.
I'd also add just really quickly before we break here that I think that Pamela touched on this briefly in her presentation, that the market for ebooks, especially in art, is totally unproven, if not non-existent completely. So I think a big part of what we're doing, but I'm saying this as a digital person, someone who's been hired to make digital publications in a museum. One of my main priorities, really, and I think all of us would agree, is that we are looking for that market. We're trying to decide what do people want, how do they want it, what will they pay for, how will they pay for it, and it means restructuring some of the way we allocate funds and the way we expect funds to come back in, and a little bit, and I think also reallocate our metrics for success. So sometimes maybe a project will lose money, well, they often do, but maybe they'll lose money, but they will be a much wider readership or a much wider usage, and then that's a success. So I'd add that. Yeah. One more. If it's really quick, because I'm gonna get in trouble.
Okay, I don't want you to get in trouble. Just following along the lines of some of your comments about the current state of digital publishing. I'm the director of exhibition research and publishing at the Cooper-Hewitt Museum, and what I've been trying to do a lot, I've only been there for a couple of years, is look at the landscape that's out, that exists. Like, the print is more tested and clear cut, but the digital one is less so. So my question for you guys, and you can always come back to me later if you want to, what I've been trying to do lately is find what I would consider to be really beautifully designed, well-created, good content in digital form that you really love. It doesn't have to be a museum, because I frankly feel that some other people are maybe doing this in more interesting ways right at the moment, and I don't mean to diss anybody in this room, but just, some of the things that magazines are doing. So is there anything that you're really excited about right now that you see happening out there? Because I'm looking around a lot, and there's a lot of things that are, it makes you realize that the model for the printed art book has been around for a really long time. There's a lot of fabulous design and fabulous creativity, and I feel like this other world is sorry, this is a long question. So that was my question.
No, that's a good question. Can we answer really quickly and then we'll.
Or if you can't answer
Or-
really quickly, maybe
I would say,
email or something.
yeah, and I definitely try to share examples of those kinds of things at the Blicky, at the digitalpublishingblicky.com. So there are some great examples there of things that have caught our eye. But yeah, I agree. It's hard to, when you're trying to come up with there's no model to follow. There's no example of best practice. So we're kind of stumbling along trying to look for those
And
things.
no one wants to be the one to lose more money. Because if you lose money on a print book because it was on broken pottery from Anatolia, you can say, well, it was part of the mission of the institution, but there's less of an interest in losing money about it when you then had to develop it digitally. And not only did you lose money, but it was kind of weird and no one was interested in it as a format. So I think there's sort of an added layer of concern in sort of museum hierarchies and publishing hierarchies about doing that. And I think you have to make a very deliberate decision to experiment, to put the experimentation ahead of the profit loss statement for that one thing. And that's the kind of thing that CFOs say, well, let some other museum experiment on that. So it's, a lot of people might have to make that decision to experiment for it to work.
No, I also think that for me, a lot of digital publishing in the museum world still looks a lot like a book that somebody put online.
Tell me about it.
And except you can focus in on the pictures, you can blow up the pictures, which is great, but
the goobers or they're going to imprint on me.
I had to check my bag so that I could bring that stuff here, so I am eager.
Which means someone has to eat it.
For the BFF necklaces, Michael Wilcox. Yes, all right. Allison Little. Oh, over here. And Mandy Garcia.
Hi.
A panelist's best friend. Do we have to be a best friend? Do we each have to take one of those?
And for the peanut butter jelly, Sean Hummert. And Rosanna Flowdy.
The fix was.
Thank you all for coming. Visit the wiki, email us, tweet us. We're always happy to talk about this stuff endlessly. And enjoy the rest of MCN. Thank you very much.